Welcome. My name is Penelope Chatterton. Welcome to Awaken the Dream. My friends, I have a new friend today that I just met recently who is quite delightful. He's the new minister at the East Harwich Methodist Church, where my twin sister and her husband attend, and I've had a wonderful time getting to know him. His name is Reverend Ed Farrell-Starbuck. And here he is. And hi.
Hi there.
And thanks for joining us, because
you.
I love having somebody new on the show. And thank you for having the Latham Players to your church.
Oh, that was great fun.
We had such a great time. And I hear they just think you're wonderful there. And I'm so pleased for that new energy. And where did you come from?
Oh, my.
Oh, I mean, you got to start somewhere. You had a birthplace.
Oh, yes. Twin Falls, Idaho. How was that?
How's that good? Were you raised there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My dad, no, I actually was raised in southern Idaho.
Okay, so is that called the Midwest?
No, it's the Rocky Mountains.
Oh, okay.
So we were in the high desert in Pocatello and a few other places where I lived.
Yeah. Is it nice out there? Do you miss it?
Lovely. I love the mountains.
You do?
That's really my environment.
Is that how you fell in love with nature and all of that?
I'm sure it was. My mother really had a great love and passion for nature, and we camped a month every year during my dad's vacation and saw the national parks and did all of that. And my brother and I, young, were living in places where we could wander, and we had the freedom back in those in the 50s. There wasn't worry about anything.
We're
so
safe.
We wandered all over the hills around Pocatello and then wherever else we lived.
Yeah.
So.
Older or younger?
He's 16 months younger.
Ah, so he looked up to you, I'm sure.
Well,
Did you take care of him?
We were companions, yeah.
Are you still close?
Distant, not that close.
Yeah.
Not that close. Yeah. I mean, we talk and visit, but we don't live near each other. He lives in Princeton, New Jersey.
Yeah. So where did you end up going to school, or how did you, I mean, there's so many questions. I want to thread your life into why the ministry and why the calling and how did it come, and or didn't it come for a while and then it came?
It came while I was in college, and what came was a crisis, a spiritual crisis, a crisis of meaning.
Yeah.
And feeling lost and not having a sense of direction. Yeah. And which is pretty
sounds like life.
Normal for college years.
Yeah.
For a lot of people. And then hearing the gospel in a fresh way. My dad's a United Methodist minister, so I'd grown up in the church.
I didn't know that.
And
cool.
But this was in a different way, and then had an encounter with Christ and gave my life to Him, gave my heart to Him, not really sure at all what that meant.
Interesting.
And then, but that unfolded from that time. So I was I think I was 20 at the time.
So you got into the ministry early.
Well, that wasn't the ministry. That was just a kind of a new focus and a center for my life.
Okay. Okay. So you weren't in divinity school or anything?
Not at all.
No.
I was still in college, and it was later, several years later, that I got a sense that I had some gifts and I needed to go to gifts and graces, as John Wesley would say, and I needed to go to seminary. Yeah. I wasn't jazzed about working in the church. I had not particularly enjoyed growing up in the church. I hated being a preacher's kid. And
I hear that's typical.
Yeah, it's pretty typical. Yeah. Well, it's the projection of everybody's expectations onto you that you be something that you're really not. Yeah. And so I was always very rebellious about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Good for you. You sound like a normal guy.
Well, it felt normal at the time. Yeah.
So, did your father expect anything that way? Nothing. From either child?
Neither of my parents expected us to do anything. And so the calling came, I've come to understand that this kind of a calling, to be a parish minister in the Christian church, comes from a call from God and a call from the church, capital C. Okay. So that it was people seeing me, experiencing me, affirming gifts that I had, imagining for me in a role, and I began to then say, okay, maybe I need to explore this. Nevertheless, I went to seminary out in Berkeley and really didn't have much to do with the church even then.
Yeah.
And it was later, toward the end of seminary, that I decided, well, I guess I have to do this parish ministry thing, or I'm not going to have any peace. And so I made connection with the California-Nevada Annual Conference and was ordained a deacon first and an elder, just like your brother-in-law David.
Yes, yes.
And served churches, 3 churches out there for 16 years.
That's a long stretch.
And then that was a long stretch. And then we felt moved to move back to New England. Cindy's, my wife's family, was in Northeastham.
Yeah.
And
Nice.
we wanted to be closer to them, and so we moved back. And I was on leave of absence.
Yeah.
And then I was offered an opportunity to be an interim minister at the Osterville United Methodist Church.
Oh, were you?
Their pastor had died unexpectedly, and
Oh.
so I did that assignment for 9 months, and that gave me an entree into this conference, the New England Conference, so I could say, is there a place for me? Do you have an appointment for me? And
Yeah.
we were given the appointment in Barrington, Rhode Island, where
Oh.
my kids finished high school, and after 8 years, then we headed up to Springfield, Massachusetts,
Yeah.
to Trinity
Yeah.
United Methodist Church.
Oh, were you there too?
Yes, I was.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah.
Like David?
Like David, yeah.
I'll be
yeah.
doggone.
Quite the experience.
Well,
Quite the experience.
Our church is all different. When you take on a parish,
Sure.
I mean, they have
Well,
different personalities.
some of them are closer to each other than others. Trinity was the most unlike any of my other appointments.
Really?
Well, it was a big congregation at one time. It was a Gothic cathedral that could
I've seen it.
seat 800.
Yeah.
So it was a very
800.
different kind of congregation. Well, not people are people,
Yeah.
but it was a little bit different.
Yeah.
So anyway, then after that, after 4 years there, went to Scituate, Rhode Island, to the Village of Hope, to Shepherd of the Valley United Methodist Church.
How nice.
And retired in June 2013.
And you didn't get away with it.
I didn't get away with it. I did not expect to be back where I am, but when offered the opportunity for a part-time appointment, I thought, well, I'd like to do that, and I've immediately gotten back into it, so I'm thoroughly enjoying it.
Well, from what I'm
Great little
hearing, the
congregation.
feedback is you're creative and passionate and imaginative. And you know, if that spark was seen early on by folks that gave you the nudge, I can understand that, because you are a presence in the church for sure. It's great.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a wonderful mission to see that you so alive up there.
Well, it's
Awake, as they say.
Awake.
Awake.
Yes.
You're awake.
It's fun.
Yeah.
We are having fun, and if something's not fun, at least part of the time, it's probably not worth doing.
You know,
so
you
ministry
sound like you
has
got a
always
little
been.
wisdom there.
Yeah, ministry is all church. If church isn't fun, if we can't laugh, if we can't celebrate, if we can't be authentic and real instead of some other
Pretending to be something you're
pretending
not.
to be something,
Yeah.
then that doesn't interest me very much. So
Yeah. Well, you sound like an adult.
I'm working on it.
You're working on it.
I'm
So am
working
I.
on that.
Yeah,
Growing up takes a long time.
I know. I still don't know if I'm ever going to make it. I'm always in trouble over something, but
Yeah.
I mean well. Well, so here you are, and what's so ideal, I guess, is you're on the Cape, which you
We
love.
had wanted to live on the Cape for a long time and wanted to retire here,
Yeah.
and did retire here for the 1 year before this opened up, and so we were still kind of finding our way in retirement, and that's not an easy transition. I found that I was not necessarily very creative the first year.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to having some roots and networking with and having relationships in place whenever I finish this appointment.
Yeah. Well, I hope you stay there a while.
Well,
Now,
God
listen,
willing.
you can tell me this, because I've sung in a lot of churches as a singer, and you've been in a lot of churches, and the personalities are different, and ministers are so different.
Absolutely.
And it's so interesting to me. They bring their background, their whole personality, whether who they are, comes through. And it's very interesting to see how, I don't know, how do you know which faith to pick, for instance? Did you pick the Methodist just because of your, well, you said you didn't.
It was the easiest path at the time.
At the time,
We
okay.
had been American Baptist during college years. I attended a Presbyterian church.
Oh, did you?
Was familiar with the Quakers, was, you know, had a variety of experiences. And I'm not a chauvinistic, flag-waving United Methodist.
Aha.
It's just one denomination, and so
the principles are simple? I mean, I don't know.
Well, the principle, I don't think of United Methodist principles, I think of gospel principles.
Okay.
I mean, my commitment is to Jesus and to working to share the gospel, embody it, encourage others to be touched by his truth. So United Methodism and the theology of Wesley is secondary for me.
Okay.
So that's always been the case.
Is it fun to interpret the Bible and figure out what it means? Does everybody bring a different tale to it or a different perspective to it?
Yeah, one of the great things I learned probably 20 years ago is that preaching is a communal exercise. And most preachers, as they prepare, will read commentaries, read other sermons, and that's exactly what should happen, because I do not bring an original word.
Yeah.
I bring a word that has been experienced in the church, and so I love that communal dimension of it. And
you can present it in a unique way.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Yes,
right.
Because everything I spit out when I do something is I'm taking from someone who wrote this.
Right.
So.
And so most of what I do is as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm a regular magpie. But that's wonderful. So there's some creativity there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, it's funny, I'm really appreciating that in a fresh way.
Are you?
Preparing a sermon each week. I was very happy to let it go in mid 2013.
Yeah.
But am happily back at it and enjoying the process very much. And it helps to be able to connect with a congregation where you're getting some feedback from them, and so that you know that there's a connection.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, you had a rest. And maybe coming back, you're even seeing new things in you.
It may well be.
Yeah.
There's a freedom about it that was not necessarily there when I was responsible for a larger congregation and felt the weight of the soul weight of that congregation's liveliness or not, you know, and its struggles and so forth. Here I'm feeling much more relaxed.
Yeah. It's a cozy
great.
Little church.
It is a cozy little church with wonderful people, and it's just great.
That's nice. Well, I'm so glad you're here. I
Me
hear
too.
about you all the time. And you love nature, and you love kayaking. And
yes, indeed.
And your kids are okay.
My kids are okay.
Okay.
My kids are okay, yeah. My daughter and her husband, Doug, live in Manhattan, and they are in the financial industry.
Wow.
My daughter is a compliance officer with a hedge fund.
Oh, gee.
And doing very well and enjoying her work. And my son Josh is in his final year of residency, medical residency at Maine Medical Center in Portland, Maine. And he and his fiancée are hoping maybe to move to Hawaii for a couple of years. He'll be a hospitalist.
Oh my gosh, that is fabulous.
So anyway, yeah, they're doing great.
Now let me ask you this, and I'm speaking from my own projection, is that when you do prepare and you share, it's the most beautiful experience in the world, because you've got it. You know, you've got something that you've worked on, and you've creatively packaged it, and you could, I don't know about you, but I bet you tingle when it's.
Sometimes I do, and you know, it's not always the same, and some weeks you just feel the conviction, and other times you're just kind of pushing through.
Yeah.
You got to have a message. It may not make complete sense to you. You wonder if you're going to be, it's going to connect with anyone else.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Do you get your topics given to you? Because I don't know how this works. Do you have what's going on?
Both and. They are, sometimes an idea will come, which I trust somehow the Holy Spirit is inspiring that, and at other times I use the lectionary, which is a prescribed texts, Hebrew scripture, psalm, epistle, and a gospel lesson, and that is used commonly in many of the mainline denominations, including Roman Catholicism, so that on a Sunday this coming Sunday, I'll be preaching using Matthew 25, and that text will be read in probably 7 or 8 different churches in the Harwich area.
Really?
The same one, right.
So let's tell our friends where your church is located, because I want them to be able to, now that they're getting to know you, I want to know where they can find you.
It is located near the corner of 39, Highway 39 and 137.
So that's Queen Anne Road?
And then you go down 39 from the Stop and Shop Plaza, down about a mile to Queen Anne Road, and we're right there at 1 Church Street.
Yeah.
So it's the oldest United Methodist Church, although it was not called that. The first United Methodist Church, or Methodist Church, on Cape Cod.
You've got the most gorgeous graveyard I've ever seen. It's an antique.
Yes, it is.
Talk about old.
Yeah.
But it's so, it's gorgeous. Also, a good signpost is the Pleasant Bay Animal Hospital.
Yes.
It's right there.
Right.
'Cause a lot of folks know where that is.
And the corner store.
The corner store.
Very popular.
You can smell it coming around the corner.
Yes, I can.
I know. So, anyway, you're visiting a lot of folks.
I am. And
is it hard to shuffle all of that, or do you?
No.
It isn't.
No, not. As I say, I'm working part-time. It's not a full-time appointment.
Okay.
So I feel like I kind of work my own schedule.
Nice.
And
I appreciate the fact that you like a day for yourself.
Oh,
I mean, that's imperative for your mental health.
Yeah. Boundaries are very imperative.
Oh,
and
I love that word.
Taking care of oneself. Not that I'm an expert at it, but many of my colleagues struggle more with self-care than I have, and that may be because I have some interests like fly fishing and kayaking, getting outdoors. Yeah. But I just
we'll leave the gambling out, right?
Well, you can leave it out because I don't.
Just thought I'd nudge you a little bit there. I know. Yeah, I know. Well, you know what? Boundaries are good, and a lot of folks can have a martyrish attitude about service, where they end up just not having anything left. Right. And then the caretaker becomes the person they're caring for and starts to be the same thing. I mean, it almost moves into the role that because they haven't stepped back to breathe and do whatever they need to do to stay sane.
Right. In a denomination like the United Methodist Church that is organized, and therefore there's a built-in relationship with other pastors.
Oh, there is.
We as colleagues, there's a good bit of attention paid to self-care.
Is there?
And encouragement for us to do that. And
is that recent or no?
Well, yes. I don't know how
I haven't
recent.
heard about that in the past.
Right. I would say certainly most of my ministry, I've been at it for 37 years now, it was on the radar screen and has been on the radar screen that whole time, more and more, and figuring out how to do it. One has to somehow be on a journey toward wholeness and balance in your life if you're going to be able to give something.
Exactly.
And so that
without strings attached.
Without the balance, without the boundaries, without a sense of self and what renews myself, and sticking with those disciplines and those practices, then I get easily off balance. Yeah. And I've spent plenty of my life in imbalance. Yeah. So just like anyone.
Yeah, exactly. Moi aussi. Absolutely, yeah. Running those marathons, it was like, what was I doing? What was I thinking? When I think of some of our stages that we go through as we grow. Right. But I was thinking, doors open up for this balance as we really need them. Mm-hmm. I mean, we can all be so driven and energetic and soul searching and all those things. Mm-hmm. But it is nice I like this stage. Now I'm your oldest sister here, but I mean, I like this stage.
Well, I'm liking it too. I love what Picasso said one time when somebody was, he was at a retrospective of his works present, and one of the museum goers came to him and said, your younger work seems so serious and your older work more just freer and younger. And he said, well, it takes a long time to get young.
Oh.
And I think maybe,
I love that.
Isn't that something?
I love that.
That maybe the journey to maturity, among other things, is to become young.
Yeah.
And to not take ourselves so seriously that we bind ourselves all up and make life difficult for the people in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
We want to be free. Somehow
Yes,
we
we
need
do.
freedom.
Yes, we do.
We need to be creative. We need to use our talents too. We really
Absolutely.
need to. I had a Buddhist friend on who was talking about life's challenges, and I took that to heart, thinking, you know, if I ever wanted to just sort of play the retired role, I could kind of slip into it.
Yeah.
But then if I have something that looks like, oh, do I have to? And yet I know that if I do, by the end of the day, I'm younger and
Yes.
more alive
Right.
than I was when the day started.
Right.
And I think that's a good omen for being older, is that you keep trying,
Right.
and you keep showing up.
Right.
You can change the complexion of what it is, but
I think, I mean, my 1 year of retirement would clue me in that I have to have a sense of purpose.
yeah,
And it doesn't have to be the kind of purpose I had when I was working as a pastor full-time,
yeah,
or as a parent, or whatever was going on. But so my challenge at this point, other than pastoring this congregation for a while, is going to be to retire into a purposeful life and find ways to volunteer and engage and use gifts and be creative and grow relationally.
yeah.
And
You never know what you're going to come up with.
I don't know,
That's
but
fun.
it also requires that you give yourself to that too, and
Yeah.
that's
And be okay with maybe not knowing yet.
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, because those doors just sort of, they seem to get us. They come out and grab you.
Right. I look forward to that. I actually enjoy doors that come and grab me.
Yeah, I do too. I call that grace.
Yes.
It's like, okay, I got it. I'm hearing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think unfolding, maturing spiritually is, it's liberating and it feels good, and you don't have to be all things to all people, because frankly, none of us can.
None of us are.
None of us can be, and I don't know if that's a myth about being in religious life, that you've just got to be serving all the time. I've seen folks that just can't seem to stop and smell the roses because they don't want to. I mean, and that's okay, I guess, if it doesn't kill them. But I like your theme, and I hope our friends are watching, who are watching this, understand that self-care is very important.
Right.
You want quality of your gifts.
Right. One of the themes that has meant a lot to me, and why I chose the title that I did, is the theme that runs through the Gospels. Kind of, it's a subtext in a way, and then runs through some of the epistles, so that Paul has an experience that he recounts in the second letter to the Corinthians of wanting to be all things to all people, wanting to be together, wanting to be adequate, wanting to be who he thought people wanted him to be, and maybe they did.
Yeah.
And he found that he had some kind of a limitation. We don't know what it was, but he calls it a thorn in the flesh.
Yeah.
And that was humbling to him and embarrassing, probably.
Yeah.
And he struggled with it, and being a man who practiced prayer, he prayed. He says, I prayed 3 times, so that must have been some kind of fasting and prayer, some season of prayer where he really was asking God to release him from this disability, this something that was seemed to prevent him from being all he thought he should be. And all he thought God wanted him to be. Oh. And the message that came through from Jesus was, my grace is sufficient for you.
Yeah.
For my strength is made perfect in weakness.
Yeah.
And that notion of that vulnerability and weakness are one of the keys to wholeness.
Yeah.
Is, I think, not very much embraced in lots of the preaching of the gospel, but I think is one of the keys.
Yeah.
And so that paradox that when we are weak, then we are strong.
Yeah. That paradox.
And that we don't, that when I seek to be adequate, I probably am going to bumble it. And when I can accept myself as inadequate and limited, I'm probably going to be a clearer vessel for God's love, God's grace.
Yeah.
Grace is all about paradox too, because it's something we are given, but we want to deserve it. We want to earn it. We want to. We want to, in a sense, be in control.
Yeah.
And one of the great spiritual lessons for me, which I'm not very good at practicing, but at least I can articulate, is one of the great spiritual issues is needing to be in control and learning to let go.
Yeah.
And so surrender, letting go, those are critical to any spiritual life, any spirituality, no matter what faith, what religion.
You know, showing up authentic is such a draw.
Yeah.
I mean, then you give anyone who feels the way you do permission to be just okay and not so hard on themselves. I'm always hard on myself. So when I'm hearing you, just show up and the best you can give is good enough.
Right. And that's where I learned. I learned about weakness is strength from people who were vulnerable. Who were real, who confessed their humanity, if you will, and didn't pretend, and that empowered me to not have to pretend. And so,
what a blessing for you.
Yeah, what a blessing. Well, and it's a blessing we can give one another. When we are authentic and real and not presumptuous and not trying to be perfect and not trying to be in control so much.
We're down to 2 minutes.
2 minutes, all right. Well,
the Reverend, I'm practicing your name because
you know what? Why don't you just call me Ed?
Ed, Mr. Ed. Ed Farrell-Starbuck.
Correct.
Yes. You know what? You're a reverend, but can you be a pastor? I don't know what's the difference between a pastor or a reverend.
The reverend is a kind of an official title.
Oh, it is?
Yeah. An official. When you become ordained, you become reverend or the reverend.
The reverend.
It like the honorable for people in the legal profession. Pastor is a role, the role of being a shepherd, the role of caring for a flock.
That makes sense,
And so, but a pastor of a congregation functions in many roles. You know, you're pastoring, you're administering, you're preparing for worship, you're leading worship, you're teaching, you're doing all those kinds of things.
And you're being vulnerable. 1 minute to go, your great gift to me, and I know our friends today, was being vulnerable, being real, accepting who you are, not being hard on yourself, showing up, vulnerable, real.
Yes.
I think
that's how I'd like to be. And I obviously have all the defenses and all the missteps of anyone else in the journey. So
Well, we all stumble over ourselves.
Yes, indeed.
And hopefully we laugh. We start to say, hey, I shouldn't take myself quite so seriously.
Absolutely. That's been one of my life lessons.
Ed, thank you for showing up today.
Thank you.
And for me to introduce you to my wonderful friends.
Sure.
Thank you. And thank you, my friends, for joining me on Awaken the Dream. I'll talk to you again soon.